What's next on the congressional agenda? Oklahoma Representative Tom Cole is a member of the House Budget Committee, and he joins us now from Capitol Hill. Great to speak with you again, Congressman. Let's talk a bit about what was in this budget and what wasn't. Are you happy with what you voted on today?
Well, I'm happy with the reconciliation instructions. That was really the key thing. The budget itself, of course, is a non-binding resolution. I liked our House budget, honestly, a lot better than I liked the Senate budget. But since it doesn't have the force of law, the real decision will come with individual pieces of legislation and appropriations they move through. And we absolutely had to have the reconciliation instructions. I think we can get a couple of Democrats in the end, certainly on the Senate side, but you certainly don't want to give them the power to be able to dictate what's going to happen. And without those reconciliation instructions, you have to get to 60. That's probably not a doable thing in the Senate.
Some lawmakers made a stand on the state and local tax deductions. When would the right time for them to address that be? And what parts of this budget resolution were you not happy with?
Well, they were right, honestly, to point to areas that they've got concern about. Now, again, this budget doesn't really affect that, but at the end of the day, what will matter is what accommodations do you come through in the markup session. That is when the committee really gets down to work and takes amendments and what have you. So I think they're expressing their concern ahead of time. I think they were pretty certain we had the votes to get this passed, because I know all those members want tax reform, but they've got concerns. The things that I didn't like, frankly, the original House budget balanced within 10 years. This bill does not. And the original House budget had mandatory spending or entitlement reform in it. This budget does not. So those are things I know I've visited with the Speaker about. We're going to be working on next year, but you have to make the main thing the main thing. And right now the main thing is to get a tax reform bill done and get it done by the end of the year. What
conclusion should we draw about the Republican Party from this vote? I know you have a lot of experience with the whip operation. You saw who voted against this piece of legislation today, both from that and the comments we've heard from Senator Jeff Flake and Senator Bob Corker as well. Where do you see the Republican Party going from here?
I think actually in the House, there's not much question we'll get this done. Look, we got Obamacare repeal and replace done. We got repeal of Dodd-Frank done. We've got over 280 pieces of legislation sitting in the Senate. So I think we are a pretty efficient operation at delivering over here. And our leadership have laid out a good product for us. So we'll get it done here. I do think the Senate's more problematical, more difficult. The margin's a little bit narrower over there. You've got people that aren't on the ballot next time. They look at the world differently than those of us who are. But I also think you've got some Democrats that potentially could be in play over there. Some people that are going to be on the ballot and would very much like to vote with the president in states where he got very substantial margins.
I guess my question to you is, are you looking at the world any differently in light of what's happened? Do you have a different sense of this president or of this party as a result of what we've seen here over these last couple of weeks and few months?
You know, not as much as people think. There's personalities in every party. Look, the president's worked this issue very, very hard. I think the overwhelming majority of the Republican Party in both the House and the Senate is with him on this. It's talked to him personally myself on Sunday morning. He was working the phones, lining up the votes, so I appreciate that effort. And look, all parties are coalition. He brought new people and some new issues into the Republican ranks. He's not a traditional orthodox Republican, probably why he won the nomination, certainly why he won the general election. So parties have to change and grow. I think we're in that process, but at the same time, you got to deliver for the American people. This tax reform and tax reduction legislation is a chance to do just that. It's a big test for us, quite frankly.
Are we headed towards another funding crisis in December? Of course, passing the budget is one thing, tax reform is another, but still we are getting close to that December 8th deadline. What is Congress doing at the moment?
Quite a bit on the appropriations front, and that's where you would see a government shutdown, not on the tax legislation. I don't think that's likely. I can see another short-term continuing resolution to the end of the year. The House has already moved all the appropriations bills across the floor. The Senate is making progress. They're a long way away, but we're prepared to sit down and negotiate with our Senate colleagues. And that negotiation, by the way, will have to be bipartisan. On spending legislation, you still require 60 votes. So Democrats will have leverage in the Senate, and we usually require Democratic votes in the House as well. So I think, strangely, you'll see the tax exercise as pretty partisan. You'll see the spending exercise as pretty bipartisan. It's a bifurcated process, and that's the way it always works out in the end.
We're going to hear from the president here in a few minutes talking about the opioid crisis, and I wonder, as you look at the budget that the House passed today, is there enough in there to curb or to scale the opioid crisis here in the U.S. to bring it down?
There is, and that's a place where we can work together. We passed significant funding increase a couple years ago in the so-called 21st Century Cures Act, $500 million for state and local efforts for 2 years. The president included that in his own budget. I'm interested in seeing what he proposes, but I actually think on this, you're going to find Democrats and Republicans working together. I mean, this is a sort of scourge that makes no distinction by party or region of the country. Members on both sides of the aisle are anxious to do whatever we can. I'm proud the president wants to make a major effort as well.